The impeachment trial of Ken Paxton ends with him being cleared on all charges.
This is good, and now it's over. And Ken Paxton is the Attorney General of the state of Texas.
We look at the key moments leading up to the decision.
We did our duty to bring the evidence into the sunlight through this impeachment process.
And how the trial could have a lasting impact as lawmakers move forward at the Capitol.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Ken Paxton is back on the job. The Attorney General has been reinstated after being cleared of all charges in his impeachment trial. Paxton released a statement moments after the decision. He said, quote, "The truth prevailed," adding, "Now that this shameful process is over, my work to defend our constitutional rights will prevail." The decision comes after 2 weeks of testimony and a day of deliberation. Ryan Chandler has a closer look at the historic decision.
A historic trial at the Texas Capitol, ending by placing us exactly where we were before it began. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton will return to his post after the jury returned an acquittal on all charges they considered. Paxton's defense team secured not just the 10 votes they needed to avoid conviction, but a pure majority of senators. Most of the articles failing 14 to 16, with only 2 Republicans voting to convict: Kelly Hancock of North Texas and Robert Nichols of Jacksonville. After the jury delivered their vindication of Paxton, the presiding judge, Dan Patrick, delivered a scathing rebuke of the House managers who brought the charges.
The Speaker and his team rammed through the first impeachment of a statewide official in Texas in over 100 years, while paying no attention to the precedent that the House set in every other impeachment. Millions of taxpayer dollars have been wasted on this impeachment.
Meanwhile, Democrats worry that outside influence and political pressure tilted the scales for Paxton.
There was an enormous amount of pressure being put on some of my colleagues, whether it was on social media or they were getting a lot of text messages. I know because I was sitting next to some of them and they just couldn't believe how much people were applying pressure. So it's unfortunate, but like I said, this is the new normal now in the Republican Party.
We've lowered the bar. We've lowered the bar of what's acceptable conduct for public officials in the state of Texas.
Now, this is not the end of Ken Paxton's legal drama. He still faces a criminal trial in Harris County for federal felony indictments relating to previous securities fraud charges. New developments in that coming next month. Until then, he's expected to return to the office very soon.
Following the acquittal, we heard Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick speak out in the chamber, largely against the House for what he and other Republicans see as rushing the impeachment process through. Joining us now, our own team covering the impeachment process nonstop, Ryan Chandler, Monica Madden, and Will Dupree. Welcome, all of you. Great job, by the way. A lot of coverage, I know, so we've got a lot to dive through.
Thank you, Josh.
Oh, yes. So the Lieutenant Governor, Ryan, called for legislation to amend the state constitution to change the process to require people to give testimony under oath and to allow the target of the impeachment time to talk to witnesses, giving members a minimum of 2 weeks to review evidence before voting. He said the impeachment could have been avoided if those steps had happened. What do you think?
This was a striking moment, Josh, because it was notable to watch a man who, for the last 2 weeks, had been an impartial juror weighing objections and rules of evidence over this quasi-judicial process, to then take his judicial cap off and show what presumably were his thoughts about this process throughout the entire time. He railed against House prosecutors for bringing a process that he saw was rushed and improper. And in turn, this is just going to sour the relationship that he has with Speaker Dade Phelan and with the lower chamber even more. In fact, we saw Phelan put out a statement really criticizing Patrick for saying these words on his dais as a kind of judge, saying that the inescapable conclusion, these are Phelan's words, were that this process was rigged from the start and that it, quote, robbed the people of Texas of justice.
Yeah, and I do want to get back to that a little bit more, but with what Patrick was saying, he's also calling for a complete audit of how much taxpayer money was spent on this process from both the House and the Senate side. And Monica, we've heard other lawmakers calling for similar action.
Yeah, it's been interesting, the issue of money throughout this entire process. We know that the prosecutors were being paid $500 an hour. I don't know if that is just for the lead counsel or if that includes their subsequent staff, but that's some numbers we already have on the table. I spoke with Dan Cogdell during a press conference right after the verdict with lots of other reporters and asked, who is paying your bill and how are you getting paid? Because that was something that has been up for debate throughout this process. And he said affirmatively, it's not taxpayer dollars. The state is not paying for Paxton's legal defense team, but they kind of left it up in the open of whether or not it's coming from campaign dollars or Paxton, his personal finances. So they said that that stuff will be coming out soon. But as I mentioned before, the issue of money has been certainly something that a lot of us have been talking about throughout the trial. As we know, Lieutenant Governor Patrick did take $3 million from Defend Texas Liberty before this trial started. That was a conservative PAC that supports Paxton. So money has been an issue here from the beginning.
Now, beyond the calls for an audit into some of this money, at least one lawmaker, Representative Brian Harrison, has already called for Speaker Dade Phelan to step down. Will, remind us exactly what part of this controversial backstory does the Speaker have when it comes to the impeachment?
As Ryan noted, the exact statement from Speaker Phelan was, quote, "The outcome appears to have been orchestrated from the start, cheating the people of Texas of justice." Those were the Speaker's words about what Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said at the conclusion of this trial. Speaker Phelan also did not say anything about whether he planned to step down at all. In fact, he stood by what the House impeachment managers laid out in their case, saying that he fully supported it. Now we have to think about, though, what's going to be coming next. We anticipate another special session coming up in perhaps a couple of weeks even. This is going to put these three leaders all together, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Speaker Dade Phelan, and the governor, all trying to create consensus around education policy. We're going to have to see how that plays out ultimately.
So how does this continued apparent fighting, Ryan, with Patrick using strong words to close the trial and questions about the political future for Phelan play out now? Lawmakers do still have that special session they have to get.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing we're going into a special session about a topic that everybody agrees about and has never been controversial, right? That, of course, is a joke. We're going into a session that Greg Abbott has stressed is going to be about school choice or school vouchers, depending how you want to put it. And that has always been a controversial thing, especially in the House. The Senate, we've seen, has passed those measures numerous times easily, but the Senate can't do it alone, and they're going to have to get along with the House.
Yeah, what about those Republicans who voted with Democrats in this process? Will that impact the work moving forward? Both of those men are not up for re-election immediately, not until 2026.
Right, that's Senator Hancock and Senator Nichols. They're the only two Republicans who ever voted yay on any of the articles of impeachment. They don't have to worry about getting primaried in this upcoming election, which has been a factor. We've seen with House members already getting primaried, including Speaker Phelan after the House voted to impeach, even though that might have been a long time in the making regardless. But the other ones who also didn't have that immediate pressure of, I got to get my seat back, they did not.
You mentioned Governor Greg Abbott. Obviously, he has issued a statement after the vote saying it was a fair trial, and Paxton has done an outstanding job representing Texas, especially pushing back against the Biden administration. And he looks forward to continuing to work with him to secure the border and protect Texas from federal overreach. Thoughts on that, Will?
Largely, Governor Greg Abbott has stayed away from this impeachment trial, not really weighing in one way or the other before this trial took place, and really sticking to the issues in that statement that he sent out on this last day of the trial. So that's the next question is he going to play peacemaker, in a sense, between Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and House Speaker Dade Phelan while they're trying to create some sort of education policy and a compromise on that? We're still maybe just a little bit too early to tell what will happen coming up, maybe in the next 2 weeks.
All right. Well, Ryan, Will, Monica, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the excellent coverage and keeping Texans informed through this whole process.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Coming up, a look at the trial through a legal lens. We talked to a law professor for his perspective on this historic event. And later, lawmakers brace for the next big battle at the Capitol. New insight from 3 state representatives on the fight over school choice.